an owl, a starving puppy, alone, deep in the forest. When I saw them together, her wings wrapped around him like a shield, everything I thought I knew about nature changed. She should have hunted him. Instead, she protected him. What happened out there, no one could have predicted. The first time I approached them, I wasn't sure who I was more afraid of, Taru or the silence that wrapped around her like a spell. She was perched low on a rotting branch, wings slightly open. Beneath her, the pup blinked up at me with glassy blue eyes, barely able to lift his head. His body was thin, too thin, and he whimpered softly, more like a hiccup than a cry. He didn't have the strength for real fear. But Taru watched me like she remembered every minute of the months we'd spent together and didn't quite forgive me for letting her go. I took one slow step forward. She didn't move. "I'm not here to take him," I whispered, though that was a lie. He wouldn't last another night out here. His gums were pale and his breath came shallow. But something in her posture, wings curved but not flared, kept me still. She'd chosen him. The next hour was a strange dance. I circled slowly, pretending to gather herbs. She adjusted her talons, shifted her weight, never looking away. And the pup, Ash, I called him in my head, though I had no idea why, tried once to rise, then collapsed again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I listened to the wind pull through the evergreens and tried to justify walking away. He was an intrusion into a world that didn't want him. Taru couldn't feed him, not properly. And what if she abandoned him tomorrow? But the next morning, they were still there. Ash had inched closer to her chest, half hidden in her feathers. His eyes opened when I came near. She let out a single low hoot, not warning, but acknowledgement. I left out a strip of venison near the base of the tree. Neither of them moved, but the next morning it was gone. By day 4, I started tracking their patterns. Taru had begun flying short distances, perching high, scanning. She never left for more than a few minutes. Meanwhile, Ash had enough strength to crawl. I found tiny puppy prints circling the base of the tree, his steps slow and looping. Sometimes I'd see him stare up, waiting. He was imprinting. I didn't even know dogs could do that with birds. But maybe instinct only follows rules when it's safe to do so. Out here, it felt like the forest had rewritten something, rearranged the way caretaking was supposed to work. And still, I didn't intervene, not yet. Instead, I set food out at the same spot. I left a bowl of goat's milk nearby. I watched as Ash sniffed it, cautious, confused, and eventually drank. Taru never touched it. But she watched, and every night I asked myself the same question. Was I helping or interfering? Then, on the 7th day, something changed. Ash barked. Just once, raspy, short, like he'd just remembered what he was. Taru flew down, settled beside him, and pressed her beak to his head. That's when I knew. She'd claimed him. By the 2nd week, Ash began to change. His legs steadied. He no longer collapsed after a few paces. His ribs, though still visible, didn't seem to ache with every breath. I'd watch him wander small circles while Taru glided above, always within view. She didn't feed him. She didn't need to. That was my job now, or at least that was the silent agreement we'd settled into. She'd guard, I'd nourish. Still, something about the way he looked at her, how he followed her shadow, how he nestled against the tree where she roosted, told me she'd become more than a guardian. She was something older, something mythic. But Reed didn't see it that way. He showed up unannounced, like always. Park ranger boots thudding through the underbrush, a half-eaten granola bar in hand. He spotted Ash first. "You've got a stray," he said flatly. "I've got a situation," I corrected. Then he looked up and saw Taru. "You've got a problem," he muttered. I tried to explain how Taru had found the pup, not the other way around, how she hadn't harmed him, how she seemed to be protecting him in a way I couldn't even name. He didn't buy it. "That owl's a predator. You think this is some forest fairy tale? She'll snap his neck the minute she gets bored." "She had her chance," I said, "and she didn't." Reed crouched, watching Ash wobble over to the milk bowl. "So what now? You keeping him? Adopting him out? Dropping him at a shelter?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know. Every decision felt wrong. Keeping him meant tearing him away from Taru, but letting him stay in the wild was insane. He was still just a baby. And finding someone else? Who could explain this bond without sounding unhinged? Later that night, I called Dr. Brandt. "Elia," I said, "have you ever heard of an owl imprinting on a dog?" Silence. Or the other way around? More silence. Then, not in any textbook I've read. You're sure she's not just tolerating him? I'm sure, I heard him exhale. Then you're in uncharted territory, Mara. You need to decide who you're protecting, him or her. That stuck with me. Was I keeping Ash alive for his sake, or for hers? On the 12th day, I left both food and milk farther from the grove, near the edge of the clearing. A test. See who followed. Ash hesitated, then turned and looked for Taru. She hooted softly, just once. And Ash padded after me. I didn't know what that meant. Encouragement, goodbye, permission. But he ate from my hand that night, and when I looked back, Taru was gone. For the first time in days, she wasn't perched above. The air felt thinner without her. That night, Ash curled beside my wood stove, belly full and breath slow. I stared at the empty tree outside and wondered if I'd just broken something sacred. Or maybe she'd passed the torch. The next morning, the clearing was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped outside, expecting to see Taru watching from her usual perch, but she wasn't there. Not on the branch. Not on the stump near the grove. I called softly, though I knew how foolish that was. Owls don't come when called. Still, it unsettled me. She had never stayed away this long, not since that first day. Ash, meanwhile, was adjusting faster than I anticipated. He followed me now, tugging on the hem of my jeans, nosing open the back door, yipping if I left the room too long. There was something both sweet and uncomfortably dependent in him. He was blending into the rhythm of my life. Firewood runs, feeding rounds, quiet mornings with tea. But that night, something snapped the routine. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of sharp, frantic yelps outside. Ash. I bolted upright, barefoot and disoriented. His cries cut into the stillness like a blade. I threw the door open and rushed into the dark, flashlight in hand. He was just past the porch, back arched, tail stiff, staring into the tree line. And there, barely visible in the beam, was Taru. Except something was wrong. Her wing drooped low, dragging slightly. Her stance was off, and when she tried to lift into the air, she failed, slamming into the brush with a heavy, unnatural rustle. I ran to her. It took everything not to panic. Her right wing was bloodied near the joint. A fresh wound, deep, clean. Not a fall, not a fight, a cut. Ash stayed back but barked wildly, pacing in tight circles. I wrapped Taru in my field blanket and brought her inside, setting her gently in the covered carrier I used for larger birds. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The blood had clotted somewhat. I examined the wound. It wasn't from a predator. It was from a blade. A clean slice, likely from wire or shears. Or human hands. I called Elia. She was injured, I said flatly. Not naturally. Could be fencing, he offered. Old barbed wire? No, too precise, too clean. His voice went quiet. You think someone did this? I don't know what I think. But I did know one thing. Someone had seen her. Someone who didn't want her flying anymore. The next morning, a folded note was left under a rock at the edge of my gate. Wild things should stay wild, stop interfering. There was no name, no footprint trail, just that sentence, scrawled in crooked pen. I stood there holding it, stomach cold. This wasn't just about an owl and a pup anymore. Someone had been watching, long enough to know what was happening out here, long enough to want it stopped. And Taru had paid the price. Ash sat beside me, ears back, eyes locked on the tree line. That was the moment it shifted. This wasn't a story of nature adapting to nurture. This was a warning. Taru didn't fight the bandages. She lay still under my care, eyes half-lidded, pulse faint but steady. The cut near her wing joint had congealed into a harsh black line, rimmed with bruising. Her feathers, usually pristine, looked dull, matted with dried blood and forest grit. She'd been down for a while before I found her. Ash didn't leave her side. He curled against the crate she rested in, nose tucked under her wing flap when it drooped through the bars. Every hour or so he would whimper softly and then go quiet again, as if saving his voice for when it really mattered. I moved through the house in silence. I'd set her carrier beside the wood stove, warm and dim. A few feet away, Ash napped restlessly. I made broth, rechecked the stitches, left my front lights off. Someone had been close enough to leave a note. They might come back. But it wasn't fear that crept up my spine. It was a kind of mourning. Not for her death, but for her dignity. Something sacred had been disturbed, broken in a way that wouldn't fully heal. I thought of the early days, of Taru in flight, sharp and certain, and of Ash beneath her shadow. That strange bond, unspoken but unmistakable. how the forest had allowed them something improbable. Now she was grounded, and he had become something else. Less wild, more dependent. He no longer glanced toward the trees for her. He waited by me, watched me, slept in the hallway outside my room as if the shift in their roles had settled. She'd led him to safety, and now it was my turn. But it didn't feel right. Outside, the air had changed. Fog hugged the earth low and slow. The birds that normally sang at dawn were mute. The scent of pine was thick, sour. I walked the perimeter of my cabin twice, each time spotting small signs. A broken twig where none should be, a boot print soft in the moss, already fading. Whoever left the note hadn't come to threaten. They'd come to interfere. And Taru had intercepted it. The next few days blurred. Ash adapted faster than I expected. He ate from my hand, nuzzled my knee when I paused too long, but he kept returning to her. He didn't understand that she was healing, only that she was changed. Slower, still. By the third day, she tried to stand, wobbly, wing half spread. She made it as far as the edge of the crate before collapsing into the blanket. But Ash was there, licking her face, pawing gently at her chest. Her eyes opened, sharp for a moment, a spark still there. That night, the wind returned, strong, relentless, as if the forest itself had caught scent of the fracture inside our home and was unsettled by it. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were no longer welcome here, not the way we'd been before. On the fourth morning after Taru's injury, I found feathers near the edge of the property. Not hers. Lighter, smaller, down from a hawk or owl, scattered in a rough circle just beyond the tree line, along with faint drag marks. Something had happened there. Something recent. Ash caught the scent first. He ran straight to the spot, tail rigid, nose darting in zigzags. I followed, heart beating a little too fast. The forest was quiet again, too quiet. No birdsong, no squirrels in the branches. Just the slow drip of condensation and the distant creak of trees swaying in rhythm with something I couldn't hear. I called Elia. He didn't answer. That afternoon, a truck appeared at the far end of my drive. Black. No plates. The driver didn't step out, just waited, watched, then backed away after a few minutes and disappeared into the mist. I felt the stillness wrap around me like a warning. Ash barked once, not playful, protective. Taru stirred for the first time in hours. Something had shifted. That evening I found another note. This time it was nailed to the shed door. Leave it be, before it disappears. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat beside Taru's crate, the firelight casting her silhouette large on the wall. Ash lay between us, twitching in dreams, one paw pressed against the wood floor as if running. I tried to imagine what it meant. Before it disappears, the owl, the dog, me, or maybe something larger, the bond itself. I started remembering rumors I'd brushed off before, whispers from Reed about local trappers. Not for fur, but for trade. Illegal wildlife brokers who moved silently through state parks, collecting exotic anomalies. And what's more exotic than an owl raising a pup? I should have gone to the authorities. But the truth is, I didn't want to give them a reason to take either of them away. The next morning, I set up motion-triggered cameras around the perimeter, and that's when I saw it. Between 3:12 and 3:14 a.m., a figure moved through the clearing, hooded, barefoot, carrying a satchel that bulged at the bottom, and behind them, dragging slowly, a second animal crate. They weren't just watching anymore. They were collecting. I watched the clip again and again, trying to slow the frame, trying to catch a detail I missed. But what struck me most wasn't the figure. It was what came after. At 3:15, the cameras cut to static, all of them. And then, exactly 1 minute later, came a sound I hadn't heard in weeks. Taru's call, a single sharp hoot, followed by nothing. But when I raced outside that morning, she was still there, alive, awake, watching. And just behind her in the dirt, 3 claw marks, fresh, long, deep. Someone or something had been right outside. So the question now wasn't what happens if I interfere, it was what happens if I don't. Taru stood for the first time at full height on the 7th day after the injury. Her wings still hung crooked, but her stare had changed. It wasn't pain anymore, it was awareness. She knew someone had come into our world, someone who didn't belong. Ash hovered nearby, no longer playful. He barked at shadows now, slept with one eye open. Why would a wild owl guard a dog if it meant staying grounded, vulnerable? And more importantly, why hadn't she left? I checked the cameras again. New footage, 2:47 a.m., movement, same figure. But this time, they weren't carrying a crate. They were holding something else, a length of chain. They stepped halfway into the clearing, paused, then looked up directly at the lens. Who were they trying to intimidate? Me or Taru? The next evening, I buried the cameras, moved food storage indoors, nailed shut the shed. I even loaded the rifle my father left behind, a weapon I swore I'd never touch again. But what if this wasn't about protection anymore? What if it was possession? Ash had begun pacing in patterns, the same loop every night, from Taru's crate to the back door, around the woodpile, and back, like he was tracing something, or waiting for it to return. Had they marked him, claimed him as some kind of prize? And if they came for him, would I be able to stop them? I started sleeping beside the crate. Taru didn't blink. She hadn't vocalized in days. Owls are silent when they hunt, but they're also silent when they grieve. Was she preparing for something, or saying goodbye? That night, I found the third message, carved into my porch post, gouged deep with something sharp. This is not yours. No signature, no blood, just wood splinters and intent. So now I had a decision to make. Run and lose whatever strange miracle had grown between predator and prey, or stay and risk being part of something I no longer controlled. But what if the choice wasn't mine anymore? At 4:03 a.m. my power went out. No storm, no wind, just the click and the darkness. I lit a lantern. Taru shifted. Ash growled low, almost a whisper. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Close. Measured. Someone circling the house. Then a sound that didn't fit at all. Metal dragging across stone. Was it the chain again, or something else entirely? I grabbed the rifle and opened the door. Nothing. No movement. No tracks. No sound. Only a single object left on the porch. A feather. But not from Taru. This one was white. Ash sniffed it, then pulled away fast, tail tucked, head low. Fear. So now the question was this. Who else had been watching this entire time? And what did they want with my owl and my dog? The feather didn't belong to any species I'd seen in Blackwood. Too long for a dove, too soft for a hawk. It glowed faintly in the lantern light, like it had been dusted with ash or salt. I placed it on the table beside the motion sensors. The second I turned away, Ash growled again, staring straight at it. Why would a puppy fear a feather? That same night, the cameras restarted. No one had touched them. No tampering, no visible damage. Yet the memory logs were scrambled, corrupted from the inside. Every frame from the last 48 hours, static. Except one. A still image burned in mid-frame. No movement, no timestamp. It showed the clearing, empty. But on the far side, between the trees, was a blurred outline. Human-shaped, tall, and what looked like antlers. Could it have been a camera glitch? Or was someone trying to show me something? I printed the image and pinned it to the wall. The longer I looked, the less I understood. The outline didn't match any animal I knew. Too narrow for a deer, too wrong for a man. The following morning, Ash refused to go outside. He whined at the door, ears flat, body trembling. I tried coaxing him with food. Nothing. He backed into the corner of the kitchen and stayed there. When I opened the back door, the air was wrong, heavier, and silent again. Halfway to the clearing, I saw it. A circle of stones, newly arranged in the moss. 7 stones, perfectly spaced. And in the center, a fresh kill. A squirrel, split open but untouched. No blood, no scavenging, just placed. Who would do this, and what message were they trying to send? Taru stayed alert that night. Eyes wide, head constantly turning. She wasn't sleeping anymore, just watching. She felt it too. And for the first time, I realized something I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just about the owl and the dog. Something had noticed their bond. And it didn't want it to exist. The next morning, Elia finally called back. He'd been out of town. I sent him the image from the camera. He responded in one sentence. That's not something I want to get involved with. I called again, straight to voicemail. What did he mean? What had he seen? Later that evening, I noticed something missing. The white feather, gone from the table. No breeze, no open window, just gone. Ash's behavior worsened. He stopped eating. Refused to leave Taru's side. His breathing grew rapid. He kept looking toward the windows as if someone or something stood just outside the frame. That night, I boarded them shut. I didn't sleep. At 3:33 a.m., I heard a knock. Not the door, the wall. One slow knock, just beside Taru's crate. But no one was there. The next morning, new prints appeared in the dirt. Hoofed, barefoot, both. What kind of creature leaves both? And why is it circling my home? By the 8th day, sleep had become a luxury I couldn't afford and didn't trust. Taru no longer showed signs of physical pain, but she didn't move. Her body remained still for hours, eyes half closed, not in weakness but in something else entirely, like she was listening to something beyond my range of hearing, tuned to a frequency that belonged only to the forest. Ash stayed close to her now, almost fused to her side, his tiny body twitching whenever I left the room. He no longer barked, didn't whimper, he simply watched the corners of the house, like he knew what I didn't. What made this unbearable wasn't the fear. It was the sense that something had already happened, some silent shift in the foundation of things, and I was just now waking up to its consequences. The cameras were still recording, but they caught nothing. Or rather, they captured absence. The absence of animals that had once lived freely around this cabin, the absence of noise, the absence of wind. The forest had gone hollow. What force makes an owl abandon flight to raise a predator? And what force watches that bond and interferes? One afternoon, as the sun fractured through the cedar canopy in dull, uneven patches, I found Ash pressed tightly to Taru's feathers, his body tense and rigid. He was shaking, not from cold but from something deeper. I reached for him, and for the first time, he pulled away from me. He looked at me like he didn't recognize who I was. That night, I brought out the photo again, the one of the figure in the clearing. I thought about the antlers, the human posture, the claw marks outside the window, the sound of hooves and bare feet together. Something ancient, perhaps. Something the land remembered, even if I didn't. But what disturbed me most wasn't what might be out there. It was what was happening in here. Taru, once proud and defiant, had become still in a way that didn't feel like rest. She stared at Ash with something between sorrow and inevitability, as if she had led him this far, but couldn't take him any farther. And maybe he knew that. He began to howl in the early hours of morning, low, mournful howls that echoed unnaturally inside the walls of the cabin, bouncing off the beams like they were looking for somewhere else to go. What if this wasn't just about survival anymore? What if something had bound the three of us together, for a reason we hadn't yet seen? Every time I asked that question, I felt the answer rise in my chest like pressure, but never form. I tried calling Reed, but the line was dead. Not just silent, dead, like it had never existed. The world was shrinking. By the 10th night, Taru stood on trembling feet and nudged Ash with her beak, not pushing him away, but urging him toward something, toward the door. He refused. He barked once, then twice. And I swear, I know how this sounds, but her eyes closed like she was saying goodbye. Is it possible for a wild animal to choose death? And if it is, what was she choosing it for? The 11th day began with a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't an animal's cry, or the usual creak of trees swaying in the mist. It was metallic, precise, intentional. I stepped outside and found a single chain link nailed into the tree, directly facing the cabin. No note, no tracks, just the link, cold to the touch, as though it had only just been hammered in. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a countdown. Taru didn't move when I returned. Her body had grown thinner to us, not from injury, but from a stillness that had become total. Her feathers puffed slightly with each breath, but her eyes no longer followed Ash or me. She had gone somewhere deep inside herself, and I couldn't reach her. Ash, on the other hand, had begun acting like something was coming. He paced the floor in perfect circles, eyes flicking to the windows, ears perked even when there was no sound. He growled not at movement, but at silence. His food sat untouched. He was waiting for something, though I didn't know if it was a person or a moment. And that's when I realized something I had been refusing to see. I couldn't keep them both here. One of them had to go. If Ash stayed, he would never stop watching the shadows, never stop waiting for a danger he couldn't name. And Taru, she wasn't healing anymore. She was fading. Her body may have been here, but the wild part of her, the part that once glided silently through trees, had been cut out the night someone put a blade to her wing. So the decision was no longer about rescue. It was about what kind of life I was willing to let them have. Was I keeping them here to save them, or to avoid letting go? That question haunted me through every room of the house, through every second of silence, through every unblinking gaze from the forest beyond the window. And then came the moment I had been dreading. Ash scratched at the back door. It wasn't playful. It wasn't curious. It was purposeful. He sat, looked back at Taru once, then looked at me. There was something in his posture that said he didn't belong here anymore, not like this. But if I opened that door, would he run into the woods? Would something be waiting? And if I didn't open it, would he stay the same? I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and still. Ash stepped out, slow but sure, and turned to face the grove where he'd first been found, where Taru had once spread her wings and shielded him from the world. The trees were dark, but not empty. The kind of dark that hides decisions. He stopped just at the edge, turned back to me, then nothing. He didn't move forward. He didn't return. He just stood between two worlds, waiting. And suddenly I realized he wasn't the one making a choice. I was. So I ask you now, what would you do? Let him go, or call him back and risk the thing that might be watching? I didn't call his name. I wanted to. My mouth even shaped it once, Ash, but I didn't speak. There was a stillness in the trees that didn't feel natural. Not like a forest sleeping. More like a forest holding its breath. Whatever was out there, it was waiting too. Ash sat at the tree line for what felt like hours, though the clock said 5 minutes had passed. He didn't tremble. He didn't bark. He just sat like he knew this was a place where decisions waited to be made, and that if I made the wrong one, it wouldn't just cost me him. It would cost something larger, something older. Inside the cabin, Taru shifted. Not much, just enough for her wing to fall from the edge of the crate and land softly against the floor. She didn't try to tuck it back in. She didn't move to pull herself upright. She just lay there, eyes open, tracking only the faint line of light coming through the open door. That's when I realized she wasn't just letting him go. She was offering him to the forest, to whatever had claimed his story the moment she found him. Because somewhere deep in her animal logic, she must have known some things don't belong in captivity. Not in cages, not in houses, not even in arms. But what terrified me was the idea that maybe he didn't belong out there either. So I stepped into the doorway, the cold biting into my skin like teeth. The forest was gray, silvered with mist, utterly still. That's when I saw the antlers. Not full, not clearly, just a flicker in the fog above the line of trees. But they weren't attached to any animal I recognized. They moved slowly, too deliberately, and for a second I swore I saw a face beneath them, half-covered, pale, long, not threatening, not kind, just present. The kind of face that belongs in myths, not in wildlife logs. Ash stood, tail stiff, body forward. Was he moving toward it or with it? I took a step forward but stopped, because something had changed. The ground, the circle of stones I'd seen days ago had reappeared. But this time it was larger, wider, surrounding Ash, and it hadn't been there moments before. What kind of force can build a perfect circle of stones in under 5 minutes? What does it mean when a creature doesn't run, but is chosen? I turned back toward the cabin, toward Taru, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Peace. She had done what she set out to do. Found him, guarded him, guided him here, to this exact moment. And now it was up to me to either step into the circle with him or close the door and let the forest finish the story. But I still didn't know. Was the forest giving him back to the wild? Or was it taking him for something else entirely? I had one foot on the threshold, one hand on the doorframe, and a choice suspended between two silences. Behind me, warmth, safety, reason. The soft hiss of the fire, the scent of pine smoke, the pulse of the world I understood. In front of me, a child of two worlds, framed in mist and stone, eyes locked on something I couldn't see, standing still as if time had frozen around him. And all I could hear was my own breathing. The figure with the antlers hadn't moved, not fully. But it was still there, taller than any man should be, half obscured by branches that didn't sway. The antlers arched into the fog like antennae from a different reality. I didn't know if it had eyes. I didn't need to. Ash took one step toward the circle's edge. And that's when Taru called. Not a hoot, not the deep, resonant sound I had known, but something thinner, something sharp and high, almost like a scream drawn through centuries of wind. It didn't echo. It just landed in the air and stayed there, like a thread tying her to the space beyond the trees. Ash froze, then turned back. He didn't come running. He didn't whine. He just looked. Back at her. At me. At the door. Then came the wind, fast, violent, blowing inward from the forest like a breath from something that had been holding back for far too long. The fire behind me cracked and dimmed, the walls of the cabin groaned. The mist folded inward like it was trying to erase the clearing altogether. The stones began to shift, not outward, not breaking, tightening, closing. And I knew this was it. Whatever this was, test, trap, ritual, it was finishing. And I had seconds to decide. Do I step into the circle, take Ash, and face what waits in the trees? Or do I close the door, keep him inside the world we've known, and live with the question of what might have happened if I hadn't? The air tasted of minerals and ash. My feet felt wrong against the ground, like the dirt remembered other footsteps. And still, Taru watched. She wasn't moving. She didn't need to, because her part was done. She'd carried him to the edge of something bigger than instinct, bigger than survival, bigger than logic. Now it was up to me. Ash turned again, eyes flicking between me and the trees, and I felt it then, something pulling at me from both sides. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Like the forest wasn't just watching, it was waiting to see what kind of person I really was. Would I honor the bond that had formed between owl and pup, respect it, complete it, let it run its course? Or would I interrupt it one last time for the sake of comfort? The wind stopped. The air fell flat. Ash stepped forward again, and I finally moved. But what I chose to do in that exact moment, that's not something I can explain in words. I stepped forward, one foot, then the other. I didn't speak. I didn't call. I didn't try to undo the silence that had wrapped around us like a second skin. I only walked, slowly, carefully, until I stood at the edge of the circle. The stones were warm, not like sun-warmed rock, but like something alive had touched them, like something had claimed them. And now, they were watching me. Ash turned to face me fully, tail low, ears half back. He didn't wag, he didn't run to me, but he didn't back away either. Between us, I felt the gravity of decision tighten, not in logic, not even in emotion, but in consequence. If I stepped into that circle, I was crossing into something I wouldn't be able to return from. Not physically, but spiritually. The figure in the trees was gone now, no movement, no outline, as if it had been a test all along, a test not of bravery, but of trust. Could I trust the wild with something I had grown to love? Could I trust them? Ash turned once more toward the forest, and this time Taru answered. Not with a sound, but with motion. She stood, slowly, painfully, every feather trembling, and spread her wings. Broken as they were, she raised them high, as if summoning the strength of something that once soared, as if saying, "Go, you're ready." And with that, Ash stepped out of the circle, not into the forest, but toward me. He passed through the stones like mist, quiet, resolute, and leaned against my leg, pressing his side into me with the full weight of trust. The air shifted. The stones collapsed inward, gently, silently, like the circle had served its purpose and no longer needed to exist. The forest exhaled, and from deep within it, far beyond where light touched branch, I heard something leave. Not footsteps, not hooves, but absence, like something ancient had been watching for a verdict, and now, satisfied, had gone back to sleep. Taru stood for one last second, then folded into herself, laying down slowly beside the crate, head to the side, wings resting naturally now. Not in pain, not in weakness, but in peace. Ash didn't move for a long time. He just sat there, pressed to my leg, eyes half-lidded, breathing slow and quiet, as if his body had finally let go of whatever it had been holding on to since the day Taru first found him. I knelt down beside him, wrapped my arms around him, and for the first time since this began, I cried. Not for loss, not for fear, but for the thing we'd all been given. The chance to witness a love not born of species or instinct or logic, but of choice. An owl had raised a puppy, not because she had to, but because she could. And in the end, that made all the difference. It's been months since that final night. Ash lives with me now, not as a pet, not as property, but as something else entirely. He's grown taller, stronger. His fur has thickened into a silver coat that shines oddly under moonlight, and his eyes, those soft, storm-colored eyes, still carry the memory of something he can't explain and I can't forget. He still stares into the forest, not with fear, with recognition. Sometimes when the wind shifts, I catch him tilting his head the way Taru used to, as if he's listening to something the rest of us are too old, too loud, or too human to hear. And sometimes he howls, not like a dog, not quite like a wolf, something in between, something ancient. Taru never flew again, but she stayed for a time, perched near the window, always watching. Her strength returned enough to climb branches, glide a few feet, but she never left the perimeter, as though whatever had happened out there had drawn a line she no longer wished to cross. And maybe that was the gift she gave us both. A beginning wrapped inside an ending. The forest has returned to its rhythm, birds sing again, squirrels chatter in the trees, but it doesn't feel the same. It feels aware. As if the land knows that something sacred was exchanged within its bounds, and it's holding that moment like a breath between heartbeats. I never received another note. No more feathers, no more figures in the fog, only the quiet echo of a question that still lingers when the fire dies down and the night deepens. What had they wanted with him? Was it just curiosity? Or were we interrupting something older than we understood? Some nights I wonder if Ash was meant to stay. Other nights I wonder if he was supposed to leave, and chose not to. And on the rarest nights, when the moon is high and the trees seem to part just slightly, I think I see her. Taru, perched in the highest limb of the old cedar near the grove, not grounded anymore, not watching over anything, just watching. And I don't call to her, because I've learned some bonds aren't meant to be pulled tighter. They're meant to be remembered. She saved him. He saved me. And I think in some strange way, we all saved each other from something we were never supposed to face alone. So if you ever find yourself in the deep woods, really deep, where the air gets too still and the animals get too quiet, listen, not for danger, but for what chose not to harm you. Because sometimes the strangest stories are the ones that never had to happen, and yet they did. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, a moment you've never forgotten, take a breath and ask yourself, what would you have done? Would you have opened the door or walked away? If you've ever witnessed a bond that made no sense on paper but felt sacred in your bones, if you've seen instinct become something more, tell us. Share your story in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, the world needs more stories like this. Stories where love isn't logical, where rescue runs both ways. If you felt this, if you want more stories that challenge what we think we know, subscribe, like, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the forest gives back. But only to those who listen.